Speciation. An evolutionary process in which one species splits into two or more species. Microevolution. Evolutionary change below the species level, change in the allele frequencies in a population over generations. Macroevolution. Evolutionary change above the species level, including the origin of a new group of organisms or shift in the broad pattern of evolutionary change over a long period of time. Examples include the appearance of major new features of organisms. Biological species concept. A definition of a species as a population or group of populations whose members have the potential to interbreed in nature and produce viable, fertile offspring, but do not produce viable, fertile offspring with members of other such groups. Species. A population or group of populations whose members have the potential to interbreed in nature and produce viable, fertile offspring, but do not produce viable, fertile offspring with members of other such groups. Reproductive isolation. The existence of biological factors, barriers, that impede members of two species from producing viable, fertile offspring. Hybrid. Offspring that results from the mating of individuals from two different species. Prezygotic barrier. A factor that impedes mating between species or hinders fertilization if interspecific mating is attempted. Postzygotic barrier. A factor that prevents hybrid zygotes provided by two different species from developing into viable, fertile adults. Habitat isolation. Two species that occupy different habitats within the same area may encounter each other rarely, if at all, even though they are not isolated by obvious physical barriers, such as mountain ranges. Temporal isolation. Species that breed during different times of the day, different seasons, or different years cannot mix their gametes. Behavioral isolation. Courtship rituals that attract mates and other behaviors unique to a species are effective reproductive barriers, even between closely related species. Mechanical isolation. Mating is attempted, but morphological differences prevent its successful completion. Gametic isolation. Sperm of one species may not be able to fertilize the eggs of another species. Reduced hybrid viability. The genes of different parent species may interact in ways that impair the hybrid's development or survival in its environment. Reduced hybrid fertility. Even if hybrids are vigorous, they may be sterile, and cannot produce offspring when they mate with either parent species. Hybrid breakdown. Some first-generation hybrids are viable and fertile, but when they mate with one another or with either parent species, offspring of the next generation are feeble or sterile. Morphological species concept. A definition of a species that characterizes a species by body shape and other structural features. Ecological species concept. A definition of a species in terms of niche, the sum of how members of the species interact with the non-living and living parts of their environment. Phylogenetic species concept. A definition of a species as the smallest group of individuals that share a common ancestor, forming one branch on the tree of life. Allopatric speciation. The formation of new species in populations that are geographically isolated from one another. Sympatric speciation. The formation of new species in populations that live in the same geographic area. Polyploidy. A chromosomal alteration in which the organism possesses more than two complete chromosome sets. It is the result of an accident of cell division. Autopolyploid. An individual that has more than two chromosome sets, that are all derived from a single species. Allopolyploid. A fertile individual that has more than two chromosome sets as a result of two different species interbreeding and combining their chromosomes. Hybrid zone. A geographic region in which members of different species meet and mate, producing at least some offspring of mixed ancestry. Reinforcement. A process in which natural selection strengthens prezygotic barriers to reproduction, thus reducing the formation of hybrids. Such a process is likely to occur only if hybrid offspring are less fit than members of the parent species. Punctuated equilibria. In the fossil record, long periods of apparent stasis, in which a species undergoes little or no morphological change, interrupted by relatively brief periods of sudden change. Sibling species. Species that are difficult or impossible to distinguish by morphological characters, but may be discerned by differences in ecology, behavior, chromosomes, or other such characters. Tetraploid. 4 sets of chromosomes, 4n. Diploid. 2 sets of chromosomes, 2n. Haploid. 1 set of chromosomes, n. Fusion. A reversal of the speciation process. Significant gene flow occurs between two species which leads to the weakening of reproductive barriers, resulting in the species becoming increasingly alike. Stability. The continued production of hybrid individuals, usually because the hybrids survive or reproduce better than members of either parent species.